of thousands of dollars to successfully create an enjoyable album. From all of the music recording and production costs, to the manufacturing and distribution of CDs, to the marketing and promotion efforts. Nowadays, this cost is literally near zero. Just think about it for a second. We have free software such as BandLab, which allows artists to create music at no cost. AI mastering tools such as Lander to help finalize the product. Music distribution services such as DistroKid that allow artists to distribute music themselves on their own terms. And free platforms such as TikTok and Instagram that thousands of artists have leveraged to market their music and build fan bases. So where exactly is the barrier to entry? The answer is that there is none. This is why as of 2023, over 10 million people have uploaded a song or more to Spotify.
Damn,
and over
10 million? Bruh, 10 million people is crazy. 10 million people have uploaded a song to Spotify. Bro, that's almost crazy information. What?
The answer is that there is none. This is why as of 2023, over 10 million people have uploaded a song or more to Spotify. And over 200,000 artists have released at least 10 songs or more and average at least 10,000 monthly listeners. This is who you're competing with.
Bro.
No wonder it feels so difficult to get your music heard nowadays and stand out from the crowd.
How
The
do you
barrier
stand
to
out?
entry for recording and releasing music has absolutely collapsed. And although that means musicians nowadays can enjoy their passions at a minimal cost, it also means there is that much more competition and music out there fighting for your audience's attention. The financial consequences can be felt across the industry and is evident in both individual music artists as well as corporations. Even at the top of the food chain, large corporations in the music industry are feeling the heat. Take Universal Music Group, for example, the largest record label in the world by market share. They reported a significant dip in revenue during the early 2010s as CD sales plummeted and streaming revenues were still in their infancy. In fact, they had a 10-year period of stagnation in revenue that directly correlated with the decline in physical album sales. Of course, being the largest shark in the water, they were able to adapt to the shift in paradigm and eventually sustain revenue growth in a commendable way. Smaller indie labels have had it even worse and have been hit even harder due to not having as many resources as their larger counterparts. The problem is that the big three record labels, Universal, Warner, and Sony, are all in cahoots with large streaming services such as Spotify and can negotiate for large sums of royalties. And they can do this because there is always the implied threat that if they don't get what they want, they will pull their entire music catalog from the streaming service. This would be absolutely devastating, as the biggest labels are accounting for approximately 74% of all streams from recorded music. Small labels simply don't have this lever to pull and tend to get the short end of the stick when it comes to streaming revenue, which trickles down to their artists as well. At the end of the day, it's important to understand that the music industry has undergone a massive transformation that nobody could have predicted a couple decades ago. We've traded the scarcity and excitement of physical albums for unlimited access to nearly every song ever recorded. And while this is incredible for all the music lovers out there who have become numb to the abundance and saturation of new music, it's created a perfect storm that's made it harder than ever for artists to make a living from their recorded music alone. Between streaming's pennies on the dollar payouts, the collapse of entry barriers that's flooded the market with content, and the iron grip of major labels on streaming revenues, musicians are facing challenges that would have been unimaginable in the CD era. But here's the thing, music isn't going anywhere. It's fundamental to human expression and vital to our daily lives. What's changing is how artists adapt to make it sustainable. Whether that's through live performances, merchandise, direct fan support, or entirely new markets and models that have yet to be created, musicians will find a way. They always have. Because at the end of the day, the world needs music. We just need to figure out how to make sure the people creating it can keep their lights on while doing it.
I feel you, bro.
If you enjoyed this video, don't...
There's something special about musicians, you know. We are thriving, so it's not like anything could end a musician's desire to be the best, you know. It's just something that's within them, so we keep it, you know, alive regardless of what's going on. So that's something special to know that, even others can see that work, you know. But yeah, let's keep it going. What being signed to a record label?
Artists having
is
beef
really
with their
like.
record labels is a tale as old as time. You might think that a highly successful, genre-defining artist like SZA would not only be raking in cash from her music, but also be the main shot caller when it comes to the direction of her music. However, the reality is that for most artists like herself, the amount of money they make is highly dependent on the type of deal they've signed and the terms outlined in their record label contract. And when it comes to creative direction, artists may be disappointed to find out that their art could potentially be diluted by outside forces. Record label contracts can be complex, and while they're sometimes the springboard to an artist's success, they can also limit an artist's creative and financial freedom. In the 80s and 90s, record deals were primarily structured around physical sales, mostly from vinyl, cassettes, and CDs. In fact, each of these formats contributed significantly to the overall share of revenue for the recorded music industry. Back in the day, labels would invest heavily in the artist, covering costs such as recording, promotion, and distribution. And in return, artists would receive an advance, which they had to recoup through album sales. The contracts were often long-term, with the artist committing to multiple albums, and labels retaining ownership of the master recordings. Royalties were calculated as a percentage of sales, but artists wouldn't see a dime until the label recouped its investment. These record deals revolved around traditional revenue streams, like record sales and touring, with the labels focusing on getting the artist exposure through radio, MTV, and in-person record stores. While there were superstar artists like Michael Jackson and Madonna who had leverage to negotiate favorable terms, many artists found themselves tied to unfavorable contracts, with limited creative control and little say over how their music and brand was marketed. But over the years, technological innovation began to make its way into the industry, and it dramatically improved the way artists created music. But even more importantly, it revolutionized the way consumers listen to music. With the rise of platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music, the average music listener was transformed into an insatiable consumer, with an endless catalog of music and an algorithm feeding them recommendations based on their preferences. The value proposition was completely flipped on its head, and now instead of consumers paying $10 to $15 for a physical copy of a single album, they would instead pay that same fee monthly and have access to nearly all the music in the world through the use of an application. For most people, this made way more sense and meant that they didn't have to physically be near the music or carry it around if they wanted to listen to it. They would just need to bring their device, which they most likely were going to do anyway. But for artists, this meant that nearly no one was buying their music anymore. Everyone was renting it instead. And since platforms like Spotify incur expenses for the infrastructure and workforce needed to support such high volumes of streams, they get the lion's share of the revenue generated from their users, leaving artists with a fraction of the income they would have made if their fans would just buy their music instead. Keep in mind though, that the artists weren't the only ones losing out on money. Record labels were the main ones benefiting from the healthy amount of revenue brought in by physical sales, and were indeed seeing their steady stream of income dwindling, causing them to look into new strategies. They realized that relying on record sales alone was no longer viable in the digital age, leading to a shift in contract structures that would capture a broader range of revenue streams from the artists. Labels started targeting other areas where artists were generating money, such as merchandise, live performances, and brand endorsements. This development would shake up the music industry and give rise to what is now known as the 360 deal. Unlike traditional record contracts, which focus mainly on record sales, 360 deals allow labels to take a cut of virtually every income stream an artist has. This could include revenue from merchandise, ticket sales, sponsorships, brand partnerships, TV appearances, and even non-musical ventures like fashion lines or acting gigs. The idea was for labels to get their hand in all these different cookie jars as a response to the labels panicking due to the decline in traditional music sales. The 360 deal became widespread in the 2000s as the music landscape continued to evolve. On one hand, this type of deal would make the labels more invested in the artists, as they stand to profit from their success outside of music as well. This could enable the artists to work with top-tier resources such as producers and videographers that independent artists might never have access to. On the other hand, the label's deeper involvement meant less autonomy for the artist, Many found themselves tied to agreements where they had to split earnings from not only music, but also every other revenue stream, even if the label didn't directly contribute to those endeavors. Some critics argue that the 360 deal is just a way for labels to profit off an artist's brand and success beyond music.
Damn.
Now let's come back to an example of a modern record deal with a highly successful artist, SZA. SZA is a superstar R&B artist that is signed to Top Dog Entertainment, or TDE, the same label that Kendrick Lamar releases music under.
TDE, okay.
SZA had been with TDE since 2013 and released her critically acclaimed debut album Control under the label in 2017. However, in 2020, she began expressing her frustration with the label, stemming from the delayed release of her music. Around this time, she had been working on her much-anticipated sophomore studio album. At one point, even though the music and the visuals were ready to go, TDE still wanted to push back the album release. In late 2020, she posted a tweet that left many fans heartbroken, although she did eventually delete it. This tweet was in response to a fan asking about the album release, to which she stated that she quit, and that Punch, the president of TDE, can release it whenever he feels like it. This cemented her tension with the label, and although she deleted the tweet, fans began to feel the frustration toward TDE as well, and are still having trouble letting go of it. The album in question, SOS, finally released in late 2022,
SOS.
a whole 2 years after this interaction. It makes you wonder how this story would have played out if she had gotten her own way when it came to her own music. In the world of hip-hop, the rags to riches story is even more prevalent. Coming from a place of having nothing to all of a sudden having a larger amount of money than you know what to do with can sometimes cause a person to make poor decisions and not move as carefully as they should. And from our last video, we know that the advance given to an artist is essentially a loan that has to be paid back. This is stated in the terms of the contract, although artists might not fully grasp the details of what they've just signed. In the case of Blueface, a rapper out of LA, it was pretty clear that he didn't understand how his deal worked, based on footage of his interview with The Breakfast Club. Blueface is signed to Cash Money West, which is a joint venture under Cash Money Records. Blueface is signed to Cash Money West, which is a joint venture under Cash Money Records, which is distributed by Republic Records, which is then a subsidiary of Universal Music Group. In other words, not only is the revenue generated from Blueface's music getting split multiple ways due to multiple parties being involved, but it also means there's a higher risk of management personnel interfering with the creative direction of his music. This is a clear case of having too many cooks in the kitchen, and might be a huge part of the reason Blueface's music has declined recently, and he's had to resort to other forms of staying relevant. Record deals today are more complex than ever, and labels have evolved from simply pushing physical albums to controlling multiple revenue streams through 360 deals. Artists like SZA and Blueface are clear examples of how label contracts can both help an artist shine, but also dim their light. SZA's frustrations with TDE over delayed releases shows how controlling a label can be, while Blueface's deal with Cash Money West shows how profits are sifted through multiple layers of management. The bottom line is that labels can definitely provide the resources and infrastructure for musicians to succeed, but they often come with strings attached that limit financial freedom and artistic expression. In today's musical landscape, it's essential for artists to fully understand the fine print before signing any deal. At the end of the day, knowledge is power, and artists must balance the allure of fame with the reality of business. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more insights into the
W's in the chat though. That has been a W segment chat. Yes sir, as I said bro, we going all night bro. This is just the first segment of our major milestone stream chat bro. We made it here. Thank you so much to everybody who has been a part of that stream bro. We have a lot in the making, a lot we are working on, and a lot that is yet to come chat bro. The world doesn't even know yet bro, cause yo, once we take over, it's gonna be a time to shine. It's gonna be a time to let them know why, how, and how serious we are about this, bro. And I told you that your boy is locked in all the way to find ways in which we can be the best, and that is still what's on the head top, right? On the head top, 100%, bro. So I wanna thank each and everybody who is here for the right reasons. And yeah, but let's keep it going.